Hey guys, All in Crypto here, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another YouTube video. This is going to be a bit of a different one, and it's going to be looking at some comments made by Putin, essentially calling for a blockchain-based international payment system. Now, this is, it's not particularly old news. It came out on the 27th of November, but sometimes I just like to get on here and share some thoughts and ideas with you guys. And you guys will know that have been following me for any length of time. It's my beliefs that blockchain came about at a crucial point. You know, Bitcoin came about at a very crucial point, right when we're going through a fiscal change, right when we're going through a change in money itself, you know, and how it's conducted. Of course, we know Bitcoin came out of the 2008 financial crisis in one of the early blocks that Satoshi published, or that was published and minted. You essentially had an article in it. I think it was from the Times or the Telegraph, and it was talking about the Chancellor's next round of bailouts, and Satoshi really, with Bitcoin, called into question the centralized nature of money itself, and how he believed that money ought to be decentralized, which I believe. I think there should be something that is a universal money that isn't controlled by any one individual like we have with the current fiat systems. And we've seen a real... The reason this article left a bit of a thought in my mind is because of, on yesterday, we looked at the fact that the Bank of International Settlements came out and essentially said that there's round about $80 trillion worth of FX swaps or forward currency swaps that are denominated in dollar debt that they had no idea about, that was essentially unaccounted for, and that a lot of this debt is likely or has a huge risk of causing a debt squeeze, because many of these banks that actually have the debt, and this is the fiat system largely actually, don't have the fiat, the money to pay the debt that they owe. And if you look at the world's debt, there isn't enough money in the world to actually, in terms of fiat currencies like dollars, yen, pounds, whatever it may be, to actually pay off the debt that's out there. So the system that we currently have, this liability-based system, which is all the fiat system is a fragile one and an old one. And money, according to Adam Smith, the sort of father, he wrote a great book called The Wealth of Nations. Anybody that's interested in sort of economics and wants to know how we got to where we got to, it's well worth a read. He essentially called money an ideology, and that's what I believe it is. And I think money as it stands today, and the systems in which we transact it, like the FX swap market, it's flawed, and it's certainly flawed. And one of the most alarming things to come out of the Bank of International Settlements article titled "Dollar Debt in FX Swaps and Forwards Huge, Missing and Growing." You know, if you had a blockchain system, which potentially Vladimir Putin is calling for here, you wouldn't, because of how a distributed ledger works, be able to hide anything. It would be public, and it would be there for everybody to see. And some of his comments I thought were very interesting. I know, of course, the situation with Russia, Ukraine, and this is certainly not a video about that. And it's, you know, I don't have all the facts on that situation, so I wouldn't even like to comment on it. But essentially, Putin calls for blockchain-based international payment system. The Russian president criticized Western sanctions and urged for a system independent of external interference. So if you wanted a global free trade, you would need something. Right now, really, America and the central banks have got so much power over the world because they ultimately decide the velocity that money is at, you know, where it's at, how much yield it bears, what the liabilities are on the back end of it. And the fact that the Bank of International Settlements, the very people in charge of tracking central bank international or global activity, couldn't even account for $7 trillion worth of value, I think, or $80 trillion worth of value, I think is shocking. And I think if we did have a blockchain-based system, and I think this is the way that the world is going, guys, I'm a true believer that it is too much of a coincidence in 2008 for this alias, Satoshi Nakamoto, to come out and actually father this whole new monetary and technology that is so revolutionary at that critical point when the cracks in the current system were starting to show, that I really do think it has a purpose and a reason for it coming about then. And I think it's essentially going to be what we run tomorrow's financial world on top of, is blockchain, which is why we actually are a lot more bullish on smart contract blockchains rather than Ethereum, than Bitcoin. I kind of feel like Bitcoin is old technology, and that Bitcoin, from a government perspective, if I was a government or a central bank, is a major threat to them, and they may, try and almost batter it out of the system, if you will. And they may do that for regulations and a number of other things. But what I think Bitcoin's actually done, what is the intrinsic value of Bitcoin? Why is Bitcoin valuable? Now, there's many arguments to this, and we'll look at Vladimir's comments in just a second. But certainly, somebody like Michael Saylor would be like, well, the energy that it uses makes it valuable because it costs something to make it, essentially. And we know that Bitcoin actually roughly uses the same amount of electricity as the Netherlands. I would argue that it doesn't make it valuable, just because there's a lot of electricity needed to use it. We now have blockchains like Cardano, for example, that use roughly the same amount of electricity as, I think, 130 homes in the United States, equivalent. And there are actually blockchains like ALGORAND that claim to be carbon negative. So they're a lot more appealing. And when I think about Bitcoin, it's valuable because people believe it is. And this, I think, is what they're going to move towards. And the way that the world is moving towards, we're going to move towards a fiat system or a system of money that has no intrinsic value other than the fact that it is deemed money by the governments around the world and accepted as it. And we're going to move away, just like we moved from the gold standard onto fractional reserve. So years ago, you used to have gold that backed your currency, and they fractionalized it. So you could essentially borrow out more in terms of bonds or currency than you actually had assets to back it. And now we are kind of using a liability-based system where essentially for every dollar there's a debt to pay that dollar. That's how money comes into existence. The problem is that we really have no idea just how much debt's out there, and it can never be paid. And this is why we've continued to see an inflation of the system, because it has to be that way. You cannot stop inflating a system that has an interest rate on it with the kind of colossal amount of debt that we have. So I do believe that this current system that we have it sounds crazy, guys, but I honestly believe it. I wouldn't tell you guys if I didn't think it. And I do think the new system is blockchain. And if you had, and we'll read some of these comments and then we'll talk a little bit about it a bit more. So I'll just go ahead and read. Russia's President Vladimir Putin criticized the monopoly in global financial payment systems, and called for an independent and a blockchain-based settlement network on November the 24th, speaking at the International AI Journey Conference in Moscow. During the event organized by Sberbank, the largest Russian bank and major lender to the government, he stated the technology of digital currencies and blockchain can be used to create a new system of international money settlements that will be much more convenient, absolutely safe for its users, and most importantly, will not depend on banks or interference by third countries. I am confident that something like this will certainly be created and will develop, because nobody likes the dictate of monopolies, which is harming all parties, including the monopolies themselves. So I happen to agree with this statement. I'm not agreeing with this individual and his ethics or motives or anything of the sort. It's not a comment about him as an individual and what's going on at the moment. It's a comment about what he said involving the future payment systems of the world and how they're going to use blockchain. This was the whole reason I started this channel, guys, was to educate and hopefully switch people on to this absolute revolution that is taking place. And if you had a blockchain-based system where the whole concept of a blockchain is really this underlying principle of a distributed ledger. Banks are calling it DLT, distributed ledger technology. It essentially means that you have an immutable record, an immutable ledger that has been verified in a decentralized manner. In some cases, there are centralized blockchains out there, and if they're fit for purpose, they're fit for purpose. But in terms of money and in terms of finance, there should be an ultimate auditor in regards to an immutable source where no shenanigans can take place, because you can just go and verify it for yourselves. And the only solution to this is blockchain. What Satoshi essentially did was solve a very, very hard puzzle. I'm a human being. You guys are human beings. We make mistakes all the time. We have our own interests. We have, reasons for doing what we do, and they all differ. So human error is something that I don't think you can equate to money. Otherwise, we end up in the sort of world that we are currently in. I honestly believe that the majority of human beings live in some sort of a... it's not a parallel universe because it's the real world, but their lives in many respects are built upon lies and government control. And I think money is a major part of that, and actually is the very tool used to enslave us. When they're talking about they don't even know where $8 trillion worth of, or they didn't even realize there was an extra $80 trillion of debt value that can't be accounted for. You've got to think that what value does that put on money? Supposed to be a store of value and what we all use and what we all actually more importantly spend 5 days a week, 9 to 5 working for, and breaking our bone and breaking our backs and spending the majority of time, doing in our lives. We sacrifice our lives for money, and what is it? What is who's in charge of it? How does it work? These are questions that I know the answer to that many people don't. And if they only understood that this sort of principle, they would really understand just how much of a lie, in many respects, life as somebody like myself who is, not been on this planet for very long. It's all I know, yet it's been constructed and manipulated to be this way. And I think we are very much, it doesn't have to be for the greater good. That I think they are definitely going to use blockchain to increase things like surveillance and a number of other things. But blockchain is the future. It's the new horse to replace the old one. And I just thought what Putin was saying here was interesting. And I think you're largely going to see a move for this. I think a lot has to happen before we get a blockchain-based financial system. But it's coming. I'm confident of that. And I want you guys to be well aware of it and to understand that, yes, it may be alien to us to move on to another form of currency. But if you study history and you study money's role throughout history, you'll see that it's taken many different forms. And in my opinion, the next form that it is about to take is going to be blockchain. Whether that's bullish for some of the individual cryptos that are already out there, Bitcoin, I wonder. I think largely for me, I'm a lot more bullish on smart contracts and these sort of building blocks that can be used to build the next financial system, like Ethereum, like ADA, like ALGORAND, like Polkadot, like Cosmos. This is where I'm a lot more bullish than the likes of Bitcoin, which sort of, has it as or brands itself as a sort of store of value, which you could argue it over a long enough time horizon it has been if you look at it relative to the US dollar. But in terms of recently, is it a safe haven? Potentially not. So we'll see what happens. I'd love your feedback on this. Sometimes I like to get on here and just ramble on and share, a little bit of what I'm looking at. I am all in crypto, even though I may not be all invested in crypto at the moment, even though we are in stablecoins, so technically it's crypto. This is my life. This is my life's work, and this is what I continue to research and learn about, and thought it was worth sharing it with you guys. And certainly if we did have that blockchain-backed system with a distributed ledger running it, you wouldn't be able to hide $80 trillion worth of debt that you can't pay back. And fascinating video we did yesterday, which you can go and watch in regards to the Bank of International Settlements revelations. All I've got for you in this one, guys. If you enjoyed the content, like us, appreciate it, so a comment, and I look forward to seeing each and every one in the next YouTube video. Thanks a lot for watching, guys.